I'm Sandra Gesing. I'm the director of the Center of Excellence for Science Gateway, SGX3, and you are at the SGX3 monthly webinar. And it's our pleasure to introduce our long-term collaborators, Drew Lamar and Sam Donovan, and they will talk about the Open Education Ecosystem Research Coordination Network. And I let them take it from here.
Thank you, Sandra. And thank you to everybody at SGCI and SGX3. We got involved when we got an IUSE undergraduate education grant in 2014, I believe it was. Is that right, Drew? 2013, 2014. And so we've gotten lots of input and feedback and support from the Science Gateways community. And we're thrilled to be here to bounce some ideas off of people and introduce a new project that we have. And I want to just upfront say that we would like to approach this, conversationally. So if you have a question or were unclear about something, don't hesitate to chat it in or raise your hand or just blurt it out. We're a small group and we can handle it. So I'm Sam Donovan. I'm the Director of Outreach and Strategic Engagement at the BioQUEST Curriculum Consortium, which houses the QUBES project, which we'll be talking about a little bit in the context of our new research coordination network. Let's see, so I should have control of this, right, Drew?
Yep.
Ta-da. Okay, so this, I'm going to do a little bit of framing here with just one image. The focus of this project is on undergraduate biology teaching faculty. And so what we're responding to is a long-standing call for increasing the amount of engagement with realistic science tools and practices in undergraduate classrooms, right? Both to support the goal of understanding the nature of science, and which would allow you to sort of make judgments about whether you're accepting it or how you can participate and so forth, and training the next generation of scientists. So here's a quote from a biology reform specific policy document called Vision and Change that spells out, right? We really have to move into a modern teaching modality that reflects what's going on in the science. And that's right where we like to be. And that we is the BioQUEST Curriculum Consortium. So this is a longtime group started in 1986 by John Junk at Beloit College. And it started really focused on computational tools. Of course, it was all on microcomputers at that point. And, but using them as problem-solving spaces and using them to practice scientific reasoning. So we're a nonprofit organization. We host the QUBES project, which we'll talk about in a little bit more detail. We love our tagline, evolution and revolution in STEM education, because we don't think you can have one without the other. We're always dragging somebody along. And we put in a little bit of bragging here on the right side, a book that came out in 2015 and analyzed a set of 5 reform efforts, Project Kaleidoscope, BioQuest, POGLE, and Sensor, as communities of transformation, and sort of did a qualitative analysis of how it works. And so there were a few nice things they said about us. Drew, I'm sorry I didn't let you introduce yourself, but you can do that when you take over.
Yeah, I'll do that. It's fine.
Okay, so let me just say a little bit more about QUBES itself. As I mentioned, this is an NSF-funded project, multiple institutions involved, a 5-year time scale, with the driving goal of getting a space where faculty could sharpen their skills in quantitative biology. And in order to do that, we felt like we had to both bring together tools and bring together communities, right? So both the social and the technical pieces of a project. And we connected with the SGCI and realized that, science gateways bring together people in online spaces, give them access to resources, and they do their professional work. Why don't we have that in science education? So QUBES was our attempt at that. We have since broadened beyond quantitative biology and also beyond biology, but this is a publication that you can access. Drew or someone, if you want to copy that address into the chat, people could grab it. And we also have a copy of the slides that people are welcome to download and follow along if you'd like, that could be put into the chat. So the QUBES Gateway, brings together communities. People who have funded projects can use the online community space to organize those projects. We have professional learning capacity and strategies. We have a big OER library. We have lots and lots of software tools, and the teachers are using these resources, building their profiles to sort of demonstrate their scholarship. And so we are building on that set of resources in this new NSF-funded project called Open Education Ecosystems Research Coordination Network. So hopefully some of you are familiar with the idea of a research coordination network. It's a relatively small funding to bring together people from disparate communities who often don't interact professionally and try to stimulate some new ideas and actions at the interface of different spaces. So the PIs on that are myself and Drew Lamar, who's with us today, and Deb Brooke, who is not with us today. And so I'll just read this little statement here. Creating a network of diverse stakeholders to establish, incubate, and sustain an open education ecosystem that is trying to address this complex landscape of accessibility that faculty face when adopting computational and data-centric technologies for teaching and learning. So trying to connect educational practices to scientific practices through gateways is a short way to say it, maybe. Oops, I've got two things going here and I clicked the wrong one. So this idea of an open education ecosystem is really not brand new, but people who think deeply about sort of the system of undergraduate STEM education recognize that faculty who are in the classroom teaching have a diverse set of resources, potential connections, right? We've got people from grant-funded projects who are providing resources. People are moving into open educational resources. Of course, open science provides a lot of science products and more information about protocols and people who identify their aims before they begin their research. And so this complex space, we adopted this ecosystem perspective to say that being able to connect people throughout this ecosystem, we have a lot of existing resources, and it's really, most of the problem is about the matchmaking and the finding and the understanding how to use it, and then having a community structure that supports you as you adapt and implement resources. And I wanted to acknowledge Karen Cangliosi for this slide. She's an open education researcher who's done some great work. So the stakeholder groups that make up this ecosystem, here's a broad characterization of them, right? Today, we're speaking with, I assume most people would characterize themselves as open science service providers. Maybe some professional organizations are represented. We have both educational and scientific professional organizations. These tend to be locus of expertise in a particular area, and biology is so subdivided that every research area has its own professional society. Of course, funders play a big role in how infrastructure is supported and adopted. And ultimately, we really are interested in outcomes at the undergraduate learner level, but in this project, we're focused almost exclusively on at the faculty level. So the teachers who can then amplify those messages, take those materials and implement them with their students. So open education service providers include things like OER repositories or community spaces that are online. And there are a whole bunch of NSF-funded undergraduate research undergraduate education projects, but they are not highly coordinated. And so one of the things that QUBES has gained a reputation for is hosting these projects. We can do a fairly quick turnkey site setup and then link them into all of the resources. And so that's a big claim here in this project, that by taking some of the people working at the interface of open science and open education, we can centralize those resources and make them accessible. And then, lots of institutions are making moves here. There are academic librarians who focus on open science and open education support. There are teaching and learning centers that focus on STEM education. And so it really is many, many inputs, many kinds of interactions that can address this landscape of connecting open science and open education. Let's see here. So in order to think about where the intersection between open education practices and open science resources and practices exists, we really are, it's pretty ambitious because it's very distributed, it's not well characterized, and a lot of this is about raising awareness of the potential use of these resources by disparate communities. And so we're trying to develop a framework describing how those intersections evolve and can be supported and disseminated and sustained. Let's see which one I'm on. Here we go. So I just want to say a little bit to flesh out the open education side. So open education is a very broad term, and generally people think about it in terms of low-cost textbooks or OER, having open educational resources that are licensed so that they can be adapted and republished. But the cutting edge of open education is around open pedagogy, which is a much deeper shift in terms of the strategies used in the classroom and the orientation between student and teacher. And so what we see is that when we're focused on an open pedagogy, we're inviting the students to be part of the teaching and learning process in a much more authentic way. So it's merging the scholarship of the teacher with the scholarship of the learner by giving them choices in terms of the materials they pursue, the questions that they pursue, and the products that they create, and giving them outlets beyond the classroom. So classroom science is great, but we all are going to be living in the real world eventually, and we creating open products that can sit out on the internet. People build portfolios and prepare themselves for graduate school, and there's some really amazing success stories from people adopting open pedagogical practices. And you can see in the dots around the open pedagogy there, these are all things that you probably recognize, right? You're working within a community, you're participating, you're using the tools, and you're creating products. And then this is nothing that I think I need to tell anyone here. Open science is a dynamic area. Uptake is happening. Verification is happening. And I liked this representation of open science because it does have open educational resources listed. And it's once you've adopted the open ethos, it creates a space for really rethinking the way that you structure your classroom or your laboratory. And open, it's not all or none, right? As we all know, it's on a continuum based on funding, the sensitivity of the data, the flexibility of the researcher, and so forth. So there's a lot going on in open science. We like to point to the UNESCO descriptions, and we use this figure because it does a nice job of sort of creating these four quadrants, right? The knowledge generated, the infrastructure utilized, the engagement outside of the scientific community, the strictly scientific community, and then the interactions with other knowledge systems. And it gives us a nice teaching space, because one of the goals also is to be explicit with students about open science, so that they're not just participating in it, but that they're actually understanding it and connecting with it. Okay, tag. Drew, you're it.
My turn. So I'll go ahead and introduce myself. Drew Lamar. I am the Director of Cyber Infrastructure at the BioQUEST Curriculum Consortium. My background is as a mathematician. I got a PhD in mathematics, but I'm currently in a Department of Biology, which kind of can give you a big idea about why it is that I got involved with this QUBES project, seeing as how it's quantitative biology. Just a quick thing about my position. It was a unique position in that my department, they were looking for a mathematician to hire for the biology department. And so that kind of put me in this very unique position where part of my time was there to help infuse quantitative concepts into the curriculum. And I've just got to say, it's been really eye-opening and fun in particular to see the culture of mathematics and then see the culture of biology, and just to see how different these different kind of cultures can be in the academic scenario. But to get back to what Sam was saying, he was talking about the UNESCO Understanding Open Science figure here. And I think one that many of you here, I'm sure, are familiar with is maybe this rightmost one here, the open science infrastructures, because this in many ways is where I kind of see the science gateways playing a gigantic role. And again, I'll do a quick definition, even though I'm sure many of you are aware of this. Gateways refer to the community-developed online environments that integrate access to shared resources, which can be lots of different types: software, data, collaboration tools, and high-performance computing being some of the main ones. But we like to think as gateways, they're sort of, in our mind, the exemplar communities that lie at this intersection of open science and open education, because many gateways that are out there aren't just up to make their computational tools or their computational services available. They also have an education component to it. And since gateways have been around for such a long time, and because in many ways gateways have been designed to be user-friendly for faculty to use, they kind of have, I think, been pushing the boundary on how to do this and work in this space effectively. But it's been interesting to watch that in many ways the gateways have been moving beyond just hosting of scientific data in computation in OER to begin to promote deeper integration of open resources and practices that are out there. And that's part of actually what this research coordination network is going to explore as well, is what open practices haven't quite really gotten a hold in the gateway space, and what can we do to see that take hold. As well, many of them are moving beyond just having open licensing to beginning to address the FAIR standards, in particular around data and metadata. If you're not familiar with the FAIR standards, they stand for Findable, Accessible, Interoperable, and Reproducible. And in many ways, what you'll find in the rest of this talk is that we're going to be applying these standards to beyond just data and metadata to other products that you can find in gateways. So we love our science gateways. Very important roles to play. Now, one of the things that I wanted to sort of try to make clear is our mission in this, actually, it's not just in this research coordination network, the OEE, but in general, is to figure out ways to be an education service provider for science gateways. And so, we like to envision in the sense that, you've got the science providers on the right, this little cloud thing, and then you have an education provider on the left and this little linky in between. And so one of the things that I want to make sure that those in this audience are aware of is kind of like what we would like to, service that we would like to offer to this community. And the simplest one is just to bring awareness to, if you have your own gateway, to bring that awareness to educators. There's so many gateways. I've gone to a plethora of gateway conferences, and I just keep running into more and more gateways. And I constantly tell myself, man, it would be great if more life sciences educators were aware of this gateway. It's just a lot of amazing tools that can be made available to educators. We'd also like to increase educational access to your gateways. So not only just bringing awareness, but actually drive some faculty and some educators to those gateways. In particular, to any open science resources that you might have. Maybe you have the computational infrastructure, maybe you have data, maybe you already have OER in your own library, but we'd like to push some educators in that direction. Any classroom materials you might have. And then there's quite a lot of faculty training out there that we would like to try to put a spotlight on for educators. As a great example of this is the SGX3 hackathon, where you basically take some educators and you introduce them to HPC, and then you give them the opportunity to basically use HPC in their teaching and develop a new syllabi and things like that. It's a great opportunity that we would just love to bring to more eyeballs, basically. And then also, as anybody who's worked with these tools recognizes that, there are challenges to just plugging and playing into the teaching context. There are changes in the way in your pedagogy that can make things a little bit more or less effective in reaching students when you want to utilize some of these computational and data-driven tools. And then finally, we want to be able to be a support to amplify and support any broader impacts that you might have if you have an existing proposal. Many broader impacts address educational use. And so we have a lot of tools and ways that we can help address those. And we would like this research coordination network to address. So one of the challenges, though, is interoperability, basically. Like you have all of these gateways that are out there. And if we would like to, make sure we push eyeballs and faculty towards your gateways, interoperability is going to be key. So like, how do we coordinate, hopefully in an automatic fashion, using, for example, the QUBES Education Gateway, the interactions between the education service providers, like used to be, to a research service provider. So let's take a quick break from talking. So we're going to try a little chat, what we call a chat waterfall. And so in talking about this slide, us wanting to be a service to science gateways and this project to be a service to science gateways, we'd like to hear a little bit back from you, if possible, on what your needs might be in this space. So I'll give you the instructions and then I'll give you a prompt. So here are the instructions. Take a moment to reflect on the question or the prompt that I'm just about to give you, and then type your response into the chat box, but do not submit your answer. Okay, so just like type it in, but leave it alone. And the idea is that we will all share our responses at exactly the same time. And this is kind of meant so that it's kind of like if someone speaks in a classroom setting, their response might change what you're going to say. So we want to try to give you that chance to kind of think independently about what you might need. And then once everyone hits enter at the same time, we'll take some time to read those responses and then have a quick little discussion. That sound good? Let's give it a shot. Sam says, okay, but you know about this already. Okay, awesome. Let's give it a shot. So here's the prompt. Given your experience building, using, and supporting science gateways, and again, if this doesn't fit with you, so you're not necessarily associated with a science gateway, you can make the prompt can be, how can you see what we're doing, what we're talking about being of service to you? So the question is, what types of information, resources, or collaborations would help science gateways become more accessible to undergraduate teachers? Sam's got to leave. Bye. Safe travels. So I'll repeat it again since,
Thank you.
yeah, of course. So what types of information, resources, or collaborations would help you or your Science Gateway to become more accessible to undergraduate educators/teachers? Okay, so I'll give a few minutes to everyone to sort of put their answers in the chat. Remember, don't hit enter yet. And then I'll say go, and then everybody will hit enter.
One thing you can do, Drew, is if people want to raise their hand online,
Oh, good idea.
we react, then we get a sense of where people are.
Yeah, that's a great idea, Sam. Yeah, so definitely you can put the React hand up to let us know if you've got something in the chat ready to go. Take about 1 more minute or so. All right. Don't take too much time. Ready? Go. All right. Okay, now I'll take some time to read, and then we'll have a little discussion. Knowing what a Science Gateway is, that's a good one.
Yeah, it's that's a tough question. We didn't set that up very well.
I can go back to the definition, which maybe still be vague. I will get into some examples in a second of things, so. Some of these things are great. We'll definitely touch upon them later, like seminars and workshops, school outreach. That reminds me of BioQuEST back in the day used to travel around to different universities and trainings, right, Sam?
Yeah, we had to carry our computers because people didn't have them.
Yeah, back in the day, yeah.
Excellent. All right, let's keep going.
All right, let's keep moving along. All right, so that's very helpful. And where was I? Let's go back to here. So, you know, some examples was one of the things I put in the chat. So we'll go over a few right now. In particular, we want to clearly talk about examples that sort of we see at the intersection of open science and open education that some of you may be familiar with. So one of them that is you can see out there is what are called course-based undergraduate research experiences, or called QUBES. So this is basically within the classroom environment where you kind of move a little bit beyond just teaching content to teaching scientific process and research experience. So there's lots of different types of QUBES that are out there. I'll mention one of them a little bit later. But you know, trying to infuse these research experiences within the classroom environment is one way you can attempt to do this. But of course, like I said, it has its own pedagogical training that one needs to be aware of to, I think, to be really effective at utilizing these. Science education for civic engagement, if you're trying to address real world problems. Citizen science is a really big one, so community-based participatory research. And there is at least one gateway that I will mention that talks about, that actually utilizes a lot of tools for citizen science. If you can do like, maybe not in the classroom environment, but research experiences for undergraduates and teachers, or what are called REUs. These are things that can happen in the summertime, maybe, where students can go off to an institution and do some research for maybe 10 to 15 weeks. And that's great because they get just a complete focus on research, and then they don't have to have their other classes that they're doing at the same time. And then externally funded education reform projects. So as Sam mentioned earlier, there is quite a few education reform projects funded through the NSF and other institutions that represent diverse federal agencies and different types of topics that have some sort of component that's OS and OE intersection. So some of the specific examples that I wanted to quickly give that I kind of see as exemplary. This is one that is sort of near and dear to my heart. It's called iGEM. And we have a team at William & Mary where I teach. And it's basically, it's kind of like an REU, but on steroids. So they have this competition every year, and it's under the umbrella of synthetic biology. And so what happens is you get a team of students together. So this is definitely like a collaborative experience. And I'll just click off and give you a quick tour of this real fast. This has many aspects and concepts of a science gateway, in the sense that you've had community, online community. In this case, they've got this competition that they run. And I'll see if I can quickly find my way around. I always get lost at these things. Here we go. Let's go to the results. So in this competition, by the way, it's in Paris every single year, so that's a nice thing. And so it's a bunch of student teams. It's international. I'll show you the one from William & Mary. And in their competition, they basically have to spend an entire summer basically doing research in synthetic biology. And they have different things that they have to do. They have to come up with a mathematical model, and they have to do some sort of simulation. They have to have some sort of wet lab component, something that they're doing with actual in the lab. And then they actually have a teaching component too. They have outreach towards K through 12 schools, and they put together some cool things for that. But in this case, this year they did this thing on phages, which is, I'll show you another example in a second. But they have a team page, so they have to create this website for their project. And so they have this little team wiki. And in this wiki, they did fairly well this year. And as you'll see, they have hardware, software, model, and other project stuff here. So for example, you can go to their model page, and they have a summary of their mathematical model. Talk about how they do the simulations. And then they also have their software available. And in this case, they use a GitLab repository. It's a little bit stringent that they have to use certain things in this judging competition. But in this case, you'll get to a GitLab repo, and they have their software available. And so, this is a great example of a gateway where you have access to data and tools and, community and things like that. But what's cool about it, again, is that this is almost all run by undergraduates. Like, they're doing the research. It's all open. All of their results are open. And it's just a really kind of awesome experience these students have. So the other example is C phages. So this is one that is not almost like an REU. This one really is like what I consider to be a CURE, a course-based undergraduate research experience. Phages, by the way, are viruses that attack bacteria. It's kind of neat. So bacteriophages is what the long term is for them. And it's a great vehicle for student research because basically there's a ridiculous number of phages out there that we have not cataloged. Think of it like an iceberg, right? Tip of the iceberg is what we know about the number and type of existing bacteriophages. And they exist everywhere. You can just go out and dig in the soil and find some bacteriophages. And so you can create these courses where students basically will hunt down and detect these phages, and it's fairly easy to find new ones. And so the sense of discovery is awesome. And then you do all this wet lab work to basically figure out information about your bacteriophages. It's really great. They do advanced genomics, evolutionary science, and gets a lot of people involved. It's also something that is pushed out to a lot of different institutions. Community colleges are also involved. So it's an awesome sort of thing at the intersection of open science and open education. And then finally, I mentioned, almost finally, the citizen science. So CitSci is a gateway that I had just learned about a year or two ago. that is a place for citizen science projects to set up shop. So it's basically a great science gateway for them to have their own website, their own community. They might have their own data that they're collecting, their data collection tools, and then you can even visualize results using some of their existing tools. And then the fourth example is just to give you let you know that stuff is being talked about. So the Allen Institute is a independent nonprofit bioscience research institute. And they are going to be running a symposium, the Open Science and Undergraduate Education Symposium, this June. You can still, the deadline is passed to submit abstracts for a talk, but if you would like to, you could submit an abstract for a poster by April 1st of this year. All right, I think it's your turn, Sam.
Excellent. Thanks, Drew. I'm just looking at the time. So I have this little diatribe here about the not so hidden agenda in our project, which is to use this amazing potential resource of open science to stimulate some reform in the ways that undergraduate biology is taught and learned. And so, as we alluded to earlier, there are lots of policy suggesting that students have engagement with science, and here's since 1916, John Dewey was saying generation and justification of scientific knowledge. Students were experiencing this before the computational parts came along, and now here's another quote that the technical barriers are being lowered, but you still have to shift some of the strategies from de-emphasizing content knowledge and building life skills and practice with open science. So there are a couple of things that have to happen, right? In order to use this agenda to advance the reform of undergraduate science education, we really have to do a lot of awareness raising, as Drew mentioned earlier. And, to make this more efficient, to lower barriers to participation, using that gateway's infrastructure and metadata, some things that Drew will talk about in just a minute, to make those connections tighter and make it easier for teachers to keep track of versions of tools and how to access the data and so forth. And then, of course, it's got to get down to the faculty having confidence to teach with it, and then good structures for the students to learn. And to get the teachers ready, it's going to take a lot of professional development or professional learning. And so those are all things that we're working at in this project. And we're going to step through a little bit some of the cross-cutting themes in just a minute to describe how that happens. But broadly, the project, this is a 3-year RCN, so Research Coordination Network. So it's really a lot about getting around a table and talking and arguing and pointing out examples and writing some papers and maybe writing some more grants. But we're really thinking about this conversation of how do we use FAIR principles across education and research. Scalability is a huge issue, believe it or not. If you think your HPC is getting tired with research questions, wait till you get a classroom of 300 students in there. And to really bring this to groups that have been traditionally marginalized and isolated from these kinds of resources. And so in order to do that, we're targeting metadata schema that walk across the OER and the tools that they're using. And then this real strong emphasis on faculty professional learning. And as I mentioned, the RCN is generating a variety of products to advance this conversation. So broadly, we think about the phase. We've got a 3-year time frame for this project. And right now, we're under 6 months into this project, maybe 4 months into it. And we're working on a description of the landscape at the intersections of open science and open education, and beginning to build an online ecosystem pilot to think about how this communication can occur. Then we'll spend year 2 focused on onboarding partners, diverse stakeholders, And then year 3, reaching out to faculty who are interested in learning more, connecting with these networks.
I want to add, you could be a partner.
Yes, yes, absolutely. So the pipe dream, as it were, of this ecosystem is that we would have a space where there was buy-in from service providers, organizations, education projects, and faculty, and that there would be this shared set of resources in a repository that talk to each other using appropriate metadata standards, and then sort of coordination and centralization of training and professional learning opportunities, and a lot of emphasis in the teaching world. You need a lot of emphasis on the social support network for innovative STEM education. So, basically, things have started, things are happening, right? Some students have access to authentic science experiences, but the vast majority do not. There are new pedagogies being developed and new data and tools being implemented, but the dissemination and sustainability of those approaches are limited without some higher coordination. And then, some open science resource providers have substantial education programs, but most of them focus on training graduate students, training researchers. And so we want to lower some of those barriers to faculty taking advantage of those resources and ultimately sharing those resources with students. And then open education is just as far behind as anyone. Most people are teaching from textbooks and following set curricula, but over time, we're pretty confident that there's going to be a shift in the focus of STEM education to engaging students in authentic practices, and this is really the pathway for doing that in our mind. Let's see, do I have this one, Drew?
I'll take it.
So, yeah, I think this is you.
Yeah. So again, being conscious of the time, what we want to quickly do here is just go over what we could call the cross-cutting themes. You'll see that, by the way, these 4 columns here were our initial ideas of mini ecosystems to kind of focus some of our ideas on areas where we could kind of like get that we thought might have different pedagogical strategies and different tools. But we've since broadened it out a little bit. So try not to focus too much on those columns. We're going to focus on the little scissors, the rows here. So what we consider are 4 cross-cutting themes that we are going to be thinking about to kind of glue everything together throughout this entire process. So we took FAIR and just broke it up into 2. So findability and accessibility is the first one. Interoperability and reusability is the second one. But then, when you're looking at this interface of open science and open education, you kind of need to address this idea of faculty professional learning. Kind of Sam mentioned this idea of like mini gateways have these faculty training things. And so if you have tools, you need to train the faculty to be able to use those tools. But then as well, if you were wanting to push those into the classroom, then you also would need to have some support, pedagogical support on helping instructors learn how to use those tools in an effective way when teaching to students. So for the first 2, for the FAIR principles at this interface, we're kind of going to be exploring, what does it mean for digital equity and accessibility? So for example, there's lots of different licensing, and there's software licensing versus data licensing versus OER licensing. So it can get kind of confusing navigating that landscape. Where is the data in the software hosted and stored? And even if you know where it is on a gateway, is it available for student use? How accessible is it for a classroom to get in there and utilize that software or data? Again, it's sort of repeating it. How do the science digital resources scale? So, you may be able to know how to get a classroom in there, but what if you have a classroom of 300 students? What makes the most sense? In fact, learning objectives might drive that decision. Ensuring inclusivity through design and practice, where you address digital accessibility mandates, a lot of that accessibility mandates out there. Empowering under-resourced educators and students. So this is like the digital divide issue. People may not have access to this. And then interoperability and reusability. Part of this is sort of like, in FAIR practices, they say reproducibility, but in education, sometimes we use reusability. And so this could be things like cognitive overload for faculty and students, adopting science tools, moving away from just teaching content. And then metadata standardization. So if we wanted to share information between science gateways and education gateways, we need some metadata to capture that. And so I'll just quickly go over this one. So that part of our dream at some level, at least my dream as the cyber guy, is thinking about OER and how what's like the next version of OER that's tightly connected to science gateways. So this is an existing OER, and it's just showing you some of the information that we have on there, some of the metadata. So for example, we've got an adapt button like on GitHub, or you can have different adaptations of OER that may use different data sets or different service providers or things like that, right? And so you might have to modify an OER pretty substantially if you use it in a different provider, computational provider than another one. So you want to have those linked somehow. Links to code, data providers, data repositories, etc. But more than just a file, you might want to include other metadata information like where did this data come from? Is it an education data set? What's the raw data? What's the information around that data? Other pieces of metadata you can include here. And then links to software, links to educational practices and pedagogy, and then links to actually relevant online communities, right? And so the idea is to take this and make it sort of a plus, include even more metadata that's important to us. So, and again, you have all of these different pieces of metadata, and tight integration should lower the barriers to adoption and support sustainability. That's kind of our hypothesis. And so all the parts are there, but we want them to make sure that they're actually working in a coordinated manner. I'm going to skip this one because it gets a little bit in the weeds. But part of the challenge here is if we want to have interoperability between education service provider and a bunch of gateways, how are we treating metadata? How are we communicating with one another? And so there are some challenges to that to make sure that we're getting the right metadata in the right way so that it can be as automated as possible, because nobody has all that time. So, okay, back to you, Sam.
That's great. So again, the FAIR principles are covered in the first two cross-cutting themes, and then the second two really focus on the follow-through, right? How do you get this across faculty's awareness and then help them move it into their classrooms? So, you know, professional learning is a different language than professional development. Traditionally, people think of professional development as being done to them. You go to a lecture about how to do active learning or something. That's the classic. But here, professional learning means coming together as a community, and we've been doing this for about 10 years now, having online groups that are doing scholarship together and publishing their materials in openly licensed. And when we turn that to open science resources, we think it's going to be extremely powerful. And then, the pedagogy supporting students. You know, this is not, science and education don't happen in silos anymore. Well, they may happen in silos, but they shouldn't be. The skills required to work with open science resources, you know, touch all sorts of things. So I've listed a few here: computational thinking and statistical reasoning and so forth. And so there are great statistics education journals that have lists of learning outcomes and strategies for addressing those. And so coordinating some of that information to combine it with the biology learning outcomes and with the open science learning outcomes. And drawing on existing discipline-based education research to understand effective practices. Okay, so we've saved 3 minutes. If you are intrigued at all, if we've caught your attention, maybe we've generated some questions, because it sounds like we assumed a little bit too much about some people's background with gateways. This is a great way to indicate that you're interested and you'd like to stay in touch. We have a very short survey. Drew, can you put that link into the chat, maybe?
Yes, I will attempt to do that.
And so really all this is a asking just for your contact information, and if you're involved in a project or a community or a gateway, anyone that's somewhere on the spectrum of working with open science materials or teaching and learning in an undergraduate science classroom using sort of open techniques. We would really appreciate you filling this in, and then we'll just send you intermittent updates and opportunities to become further involved as the project moves forward. So I guess I'm gonna finish and then hope that people will just actually do that survey.
Well, it's in the chat now, so hopefully they have it.
In the chat, right. Open the link, come back to it later. It's very short, just looking to see where you put yourself in this spectrum of stakeholders, and a way that we can get back in touch with you.
With lots of others, so if you don't think you fit, make it up.
Exactly. So I just want to acknowledge that there's a much bigger team, and this isn't everybody, this is just the steering committee. Heavy representation from Gateway's community, and some big data providers. And we're at the beginning of this grand adventure, and we hope you'll track what we're working on and contribute to it as well. And Drew and I would be happy to take questions or comments at this point if you have them. You're welcome, Mona. Did you say you were involved in the citizen science community?
Yeah, I am part of the SITSI development team.
Oh, that's great. Well, we should talk.
You're doing a great job.
Thank you. I'll share that with the team.
Great. I'll introduce Sarah Prescott since she's brought her video on. She's the executive director of BioQUEST Curriculum Consortium, and we're thrilled to have her support on this as well.
Hi, everyone. Great job, Sam and Drew.
Thanks for coming. You know, I just will add, like, just fill the space, but BioQuest is a really interesting organization. Like Sam mentioned, they were playing with computers in education back in the 80s. I like that. I like the picture of carrying gigantic computers around to different institutions as you're giving talks and stuff before laptops even existed. But I mean, it's interesting when thinking about software sustainability, because they have some old education, like great education programs that foster scientific thinking, but they're all like Apple IIe OS that you can't. It's not easy to run anymore, and so we're trying to figure out ways to make that as easily available to educators, because it's still a very useful tool.
Yep, emulators in containers.
Yeah.
There you go. All right, well, thank you very much, and don't hesitate to reach out. You've got our contact information there, and there's a great BioQuest newsletter. We should have put that address there. Sarah, if you've got it handy, you can put it in the chat. If you're an education-oriented person, but if you're more that interface of open science and open education, definitely drop your name into the survey there.
Yeah, for sure. We definitely, like echoing Sam, appreciate you coming, and again, would like to serve gateways any way we can to amplify their educational reach, and also to funnel some educators to your stuff, to your providers.
Yeah, we're assuming that broader impacts will not go away entirely.
Oh, geez, yeah.
Do you want to drop the presentation there, Drew, so we can see people if they come on?
What am I dropping?
Oh, just the presentation.
I also
drop it.
oh, sorry. I dropped in. So the first link that you see there in the chat is our general newsletter. The second from me is how to subscribe. And the third is a quick plug for our annual summer conference called Biome. So if folks in the audience would be interested in that, I dropped that link too.
We're even coordinated with our backgrounds.
Oh, cool, no problem.
Well, thank you again, Drew and Sam. It was very nice to have you, and thank you everyone else for joining us. We will have our next monthly webinar April 17th, so be on the lookout for that on our website and in our upcoming newsletter.
Thanks for hosting, Janae.
Yep.
Of course, no problem.
Thanks for coming by.
Thanks
Thank
again.
you.
Yeah.
Have a good day,
Bye.
everyone.
Bye.